Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us on our weekly AJ Zoom event, and welcome to any new people watching this week. Also, welcome to those watching on Facebook and to anybody listening to the audio replay, which is broadcast every Thursday at midday and Sundays at 4 p.m. on J-Air Community Radio. That's at FM 88 in Melbourne or everywhere else, j-air.com.au. My name is Alan Friedman. I'm Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association. And you will have seen David Adler already, who's the president of the AJA. And our guest for tonight is Eytan Cohen Yanarocak. And the topic, of course, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. The topic, of course, is the puzzling relationship between Turkey and Israel. Tonight we'll have a presentation style to start with. So Hay is going to give us a talk for about half an hour or so, and then we'll take some questions. As usual, I mention that if you want to ask a question, you do need to raise your hand electronically, and you do that in the reaction icon down the bottom. The reason is that we need to give you the facility to unmute yourself, and by raising your hand, it comes to our attention. Written questions can be placed on the chat function. Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs, is still on holidays, but we will endeavour to read out any of them during question time. And as always, if you don't like the chat group, you can disable it fairly easily. Now, for years, Turkey was known as the holiday destination of choice for Israelis, but the relationship took a turn for the worse in 2008 during Operation Cast Lead, as President Erdogan threw his support behind Hamas. And things only went downhill from there after the Mavi Marmara flotilla incident. Despite verbal clashes over the years between then PM Netanyahu and Erdogan, attempts were made at reconciliation, especially when in 2013 President Obama pressured Netanyahu to issue a fairly grovelling apology over the flotilla incident. Since then, the relationship has had its ups and downs, and most recently, in a sign that feelings are thawing out again, President Isaac Herzog visited Turkey to meet with Erdogan in March of this year. So what's the current situation? To help us make some sense of it all, we're delighted to be joined by Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, who is an expert on Israel-Turkey relations with the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security, an organisation we strongly support and which is headed by our friend Ephraim Inbar. Hay, thank you for your time and welcome to the Australian audience.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be hosted by such a distinguished organization. And
well, that's very nice.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Now,
I'm not taking it for granted.
Thank you. Hay, you're going to give us a presentation. So you've got screen sharing ability. So whenever you're ready, feel free to start.
Okay. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
All
okay.
good.
All good.
Okay. For you, good evening. As Alan asked me to deliver a short lecture today on the Israeli-Turkish relations, he also told me that maybe it would be better for me to provide you some historical background regarding the Ottoman Empire, the Republic of Turkey, one of the most important Turkey's strategic problems like the Kurds, and how Israel played a crucial role on there. And then, of course, we are going to get into the current bilateral relations and reconciliation process between Israel and Turkey. So for those who are not familiar, I wanted to show you the map of the Ottoman Empire. Today's Turkey is considered as the successor state of the Ottoman Empire, as you can see, that ruled in today's Turkey, in Anatolia, in Eastern Europe, in the whole Middle East, and of course, we can also see in some parts of Caucasia and North Africa. At the end of the First World War, we happen to see the end of this multinational empire, and the Turks, who were basically owned the empire as their successor state. I mean, the The Turks paved the way for the establishment of the Republic of Turkey. And of course, when we are speaking about Turkey, we have to speak about the founder of the Republic, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was a war hero. During the First World War, he fought in the Gallipoli frontier, and also before the war erupted, he also fought in Libya against the Italians, and he fought against the Greeks in 1912 Balkan Wars, and of course he fought against the British Empire, the French, and the Anzac forces, the Australia-New Zealand Army Corps, in the Gallipoli frontier during the First World War. And since he was acknowledged as the most important military figure of that time, he rejected the peace treaty that was signed between the Allies and the Ottoman Empire, and he launched the Turkish War of Independence. And in the aftermath of the Turkish War of Independence, he annulled the Sultanate and the Caliphate, and he introduced the secular state of Turkey. And when he did that, he launched a secularization and a westernization campaign in Turkey. As you can see in the picture on the left-hand side, he introduced the Latin letters, and he obliterated the Arab script and the Arab alphabet from the daily usage of the Turkish people. He sought to disconnect the Turkish people from the Middle East. And as you can see in the political cartoon that was published under his rule, it is, in my opinion, it is really similar to Christianity's Saint George icon that we are seeing here, that Mustafa Kemal is fighting against the beasts. As you can see, some of the beasts are very typical Islamic look, and he is killing them with a sword on it written the word reforms. So in a natural way, Atatürk relied on the Turkish armed forces when he carried out all of these reforms, because, as I already mentioned, he was crowned as a national hero, and of course he got his legitimacy from the fields of war. And in the aftermath of the Turkish War of Independence, which annulled the Treaty of Sèvres, which was considered as the peace treaty that put an end to the First World War. Instead, thanks to Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the Turks found their republic with the Treaty of Lausanne, which replaced the Treaty of Sèvres, and basically it is function as the land registry of today's Turkey. So in a very natural way, having carried out this crucial independence war and this massive reforms, Mustafa Kemal relied on the power of the Turkish army. And the Turkish army, which fought, the Turkish army is seeing itself as the successor army of the Ottoman Empire. And as a result, when we are looking at the last decade of the Ottoman Empire, you will understand how the Turkish army sees itself as the true owner of the republic. In 1911, first of all, we happen to see the Tripoli War in Libya against the Italians. In 1912, we happen to see the Balkan Wars between the Ottoman Empire and Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia of today. And later we happen to see the First World War, 1914 until 1918. And at the end of that particular war, we happen to see the Turkish Independence War, which was fought between 1919 until 1922. So we are seeing 10 years of fighting with different names of the wars, and at the end we are seeing that this particular body became victorious, and they saw themselves as the true owners of the country. And this did not change also after Mustafa Kemal Atatürk passed away in 1938, and after he was dead. So we began to see a symbiotic relation between the Turkish army and the civilian government. We can call this as a Spartan state because the chiefs of staff became the country's prime ministers and presidents. And this happened to change only at the end of the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, Turkey was turned from a single-party government to multi-party political system. And as a result, we happen to see that the opposition conservative parties began to they became victorious in various election campaigns. And as a result, we happen to see a new phenomenon in the Turkish state mechanisms called the military coup d'etats. In Turkey, we happen to see three major military coups. These took place in 1916, 1971, and 1980. These are considered as the classical military coup d'etats. And of course, we happen to see also some softer military interventions that took place in 1997 and 2007. And of course, we all happen to know that the latest failed coup attempt of 2016. So why Turkish army is crucial for Israel? Of course, the answer to this question was this: the Kurdish terrorists, or the Kurdish separatists, as the Kurds, of course, name them. This organization is called the PKK. The PKK is considered as a terrorist organization by the United States, the European Union, and Israel, and in short, by the West. This particular organization sought to liberate Turkey's southeast part, where the Kurdish population is living. The Turkish armed forces needed Israel gravely to fight against these guerrillas, because in 1990s we happen to see that the Turkish army lacked important weaponry and technology, and that is why they began to make a rapprochement towards the state of Israel. The core reason for that, of course, was the weapons embargo that was imposed by the European countries and the United States against Turkey. Israel did not impose such an embargo on Turkey, and as a result, the Turkish secular elite paved the way for a honeymoon between Israel and Turkey. And what we have seen was, until the capture of the head of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, in Nairobi, Kenya, in 1999, the relationship between Israel and Turkey was very flourishing. However, after the capture of Abdullah Öcalan, we happen to see a very sharp decline in PKK's activities against Turkey. And as a result, we happen to see that also at the same time, Turkey began to improve her relations with the European Union. So the decision makers in Ankara began to ask themselves why we need Israel. At that time, the decision makers in Ankara, they did not cause any damage to the so-called honeymoon between the two countries. But when Israel began to launch its Operation Cast-Lead against Gaza Strip, for those who do not remember, Israel had to carry out a military operation in the Gaza Strip, against Hamas because of the constant rocket fire against the Israeli citizens. And during that time, it was December 2008, Turkey was functioning as the mediator between Israel and Syria. So the Turkish administration saw this Israeli operation in the Gaza Strip as an insult for themselves, because Israel did not update Turkey before the operation. And as a result, Turkey, in an intentional manner, decided to downgrade her relations with Israel. It all happened to start with the Operation Kaskled. Later, as you can see on the screen, you're seeing the Mavi Marmara Flotilla crisis. For those who are not familiar, the Mavi Marmara Flotilla crisis was considered as the most important milestone, unfortunately a negative milestone, for the bilateral relations between the two countries. The Turkish humanitarian foundation called IHH, by the way, this organization is considered as a terrorist organization by the State of Israel, organized a freedom flotilla, as they put it, to the Gaza Strip in order to break the naval blockade against the Gaza Strip that was imposed by the Israeli Defense Forces. Despite the Israeli warnings, the flotilla continued to its route, and despite the Israeli Defense Forces' warnings at the last minute that the Israeli commandos will embark the vessel, unfortunately, we have seen the IHH activists resisted against the IDF forces, and they also used guns like pistols or knives or axes, etc. And as a result, the Israeli soldiers had no choice but to open fire against these activists, or you may call them terrorists. And as a result, 9 Turkish-originated IHH activists, Turkish citizens, were killed in the international waters. And of course, this is considered as a very important rift between Israel and Turkey. As a result of this incident, Turkey decided to ask from Israel first an apology, then a compensation, and they also asked Israel to put an end to its naval blockade on the Gaza Strip. The problem for Israel, of course, is mostly for the third one, putting an end to the naval blockade on the Gaza Strip, because unfortunately Hamas still did not change its mind, and it still seeks to wipe Israel out of the map. And as a result, Israel has no choice but to impose a naval blockade on Gaza in order to secure the situation there, in order to prevent weapons transfers that could change the balance of power in the Middle East. And as a result, the Israeli government rejected Turkey's third demand of putting an end to its naval blockade on the Gaza Strip, but instead, because of the American pressure of President Obama, former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to call the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Then, of course, he was a Prime Minister, and he apologized from Erdogan. And later, in 2016, we happened to see that both countries had a settlement, and Israel also paid compensation for the families of those who were killed on this flotilla. So while we are seeing this negative picture, almost no one in the Middle East thought that Turkey's foreign policy could change. But the Middle East became a miraculous region during the last 5 years, we can say. We all happened to see these pictures while the Palestinians while the Palestinians were waving Turkish flags, and while the Turkish administration called Jerusalem as Palestine's capital, we also happen to see another Middle East within the Middle East, and of course I'm talking about the Abraham Accords. And as you can see, before proceeding to Abraham Accords, I would like to show you some pictures. You're seeing here the pictures of Mr. Erdogan with Khaled Meshal and with Ismail Haniyeh, the senior Hamas officials. And also, again, you're seeing here Haniyeh, and you're seeing here as Salah Aruri, that these people were hosted by the Turkish president in an official way, and they became frequent guests in the Middle East. And right after the American recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, which is for us it's a known fact, but for the world, unfortunately, it is not. The map that you're seeing here was published in the horn of the government called Yeni Shafak newspaper. As you can see here, an anonymous article was penned which advocated for the establishment of an Islamic army to defeat Israel, and not to erase Israel from the map, but to force Israel to a just peace, as it is written in the article, which means that, of course, in their perspective, liberation of Jerusalem and maybe minimizing Israel into Tel Aviv and its suburbs, right? So you're seeing here a comparative statistic that was provided by the horn of the government between the countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and Israel in terms of the budget of defense, and as you can see here, population, and of course the military personnel numbers. But despite this negative picture, we happen to see this miraculous picture. This picture is from the latest Negev summit. We all happen to see, thanks to the previous American administration of Donald Trump, and of course we should also underline Jared Kushner's very important contributions. Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, they signed a peace treaty called the Abraham Accords. At first, everyone in the Middle East was very cautious, and some of the people even thought that after the departure of Donald Trump, this Abraham Accords would also be canceled within the time. But what we are seeing today is the exact opposite. Thanks to the brave leadership of Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the United Arab Emirates, we are seeing that Abraham Accords is moving forward. And thanks to United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and later, as you can see in this picture, Morocco and Egypt, they also took part actively in this new axis in the Middle East, which is empowered also by the current American administration. So now we are seeing a total new Middle East. Once Israel was an outsider in this neighborhood, today Israel is hosting an international summit where Morocco, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain are actively taking part. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is not a miracle, then please tell me what can be a miracle is. As our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, said, in Israel, if you would like to become a realistic person, you have to believe in miracles. And we are seeing that he is right. This is a miracle that happened during our time, and it's, from my perspective, it's like a Hanukkah miracle that we are always each year reminding ourselves. And Of course, when we are talking about the reconciliation between Israel and Turkey, believe me, this picture had a huge impact on the Turkish foreign policy because the Turks, unlike their traditional foreign policy nowadays, are very much isolated in the region. If we are looking at the map of the Middle East, we are going to see that they have chronic problems with Greece and Cyprus. They have no relations with Syria. They have also problems with Iraq regarding the Kurdish minority. With Iran, needless to say, last week we all happened to see how the Iranians violated the Turkish sovereignty when they targeted the Turkish tourists, Israeli tourists in Istanbul, right? Turkey has problematic relations with Armenia because of the Nagorno-Karabakh crisis with Azerbaijan. Turkey only has proper relations with Georgia, which is not an important power when it comes to the Middle East. And of course, in the Black Sea, we have Bulgaria, in the Black Sea, we have Russia and Ukraine that I don't want to get lost now with Turkey's relations with these countries. But let me tell you that it's also very complicated because of this latest skirmish, because of this latest war in Ukraine. So long story short, we are also very much aware about the fragility of the Turkish economy. The Turkish lira nowadays is experiencing an unprecedented devaluation. And as a result, Mr. Erdogan needs new foreign investments gravely. And since the deteriorating situation of the rule of law and the democracy in Turkey, the Western foreign investment is still pending. It's not coming to Turkey. Yet, instead, again, the architect, that's how I call him, the architect of the new Middle East, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the leader of the United Arab Emirates, launched a new reconciliation process also with Turkey and its close ally Qatar. During the Emirati president paid an important visit to Turkey in last November, and during that particular visit, Mr. Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan also ushered to Turkey that he is going to invest into the fragile Turkish economy with a generous sum of money of $10 billion. You may assume that Mr. bin Zayed is not investing this money for Mr. Erdogan's beautiful eyes. He is basically buying the tendency of the Turkish foreign policy with a very efficient instrument, with his money. And that is why we are seeing today this huge U-turn in the Turkish foreign policy, which is Turkey is trying to mend her fences with Israel, and not only with Israel, with the United Arab Emirates, with Saudi Arabia, and also with Egypt. Let me summarize it for you. You may all remember how the Saudis killed the journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside a Saudi consulate in Turkey. And that's why, I mean, a part of the traditional rivalry between these two Sunni states, Turkey began to hit Saudi Arabia's crown prince's legitimacy of Mohammed bin Salman. And thanks to this latest rapprochement between United Arab Emirates and Turkey, recently, Erdogan administration decided to close the lawsuit against the Saudi suspects, and he sent the file to Saudi Arabia so that the Saudi judicial system will deal with it. And recently, we all happened to see that Mr. Erdogan also visited Saudi Arabia, while Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who we can also tag as another architect of this new future Middle East, because unless the Saudis could have given the green light to the Emiratis, this Abraham Accords could not have become possible, because at the end, in order to fly from Israel to United Arab Emirates, you should pass from Saudi Arabia. Okay, so this is very crucial. So besides that, we also happen to see this new rapprochement between Israel and Turkey. Now we are seeing our president, Mr. Herzog. He was hosted in Ankara. Later, the Turkish foreign minister, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, also came to Israel for a reciprocal visit. And during the last 2 weeks, we happened to see a new affair that took place in Istanbul, particularly thanks to the precise Israeli intelligence that was gathered in Iran. The Turkish and Israeli intelligence agencies worked together to foil a terrorist attack that was organized by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards on the Turkish soil. So besides this charm offensive that we are seeing Mr. Erdogan already launched to please the Emiratis and the Saudis, in a way we are seeing that Turkey is trying to engage, trying to become a part of this new Abraham Accords. In a way, we can say the next year, we may see here also a Turkish flag next to these 6 flags that we are seeing today. Okay, this is very crucial. And when we are looking at this larger picture, recently there are rumors in the Israeli press that during President Biden's coming visit in July, also 2 additional political leaders will come to Israel. And these are Mohammed bin Zayed of United Arab Emirates and also India's Narendra Modi. The most important issue here is the expanding of this Abraham Accords to a larger extent, and also including India inside this new axis, which means that this Abraham Accords axis also will begin to function as an important tool also in order to challenge China's One Belt and One Road strategy. Because when we are looking at the map, we are seeing that this is the India's grand plan, which is approaching, which is reaching to Europe via Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Israel, and Greece. So while the One Belt and One Road of China is coming from the north, we are seeing that the Indian Abraham Accords corridor is coming from the south. So what we are seeing here is a win-win situation also for India, also for the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Greece. So Turkey is looking at this picture and now is at the crossroads. If will they be excluded from this regional partnership, or will they be included? In the meantime, in Ankara, in my view, they took the decision they would like to become a part of this regional venture. But since during the last 10 years, we have seen very harsh Turkish statements, also vis-a-vis Israel, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Egypt. All these 4 states are very skeptical regarding this rapprochement with Turkey. And as a result, we still did not see the nominations of the ambassadors to Ankara. For instance, Israel still did not send its envoy, as an ambassador, of course, to Ankara to upgrade the relations. And from the Israeli perspective, the most important reason for that, of course, is the Turkey's continuing efforts of funding Hamas and hosting Hamas in Turkey. Jerusalem would like to see an end to this intimate relationship between Hamas and Turkey. Likewise, the Egyptians would like to see an end for the relations between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Turkish government, and that is why we still did not see the ultimate jump, the ultimate leap, let me say, that we should have seen in this reconciliation process. But soon, I assume, this relations between Israel and Turkey will be upgraded to the ambassadorial level in the very near future. But if I'm not mistaken, Israel should still insist on this demand, that to see the Hamas cells, that to see that the Hamas cells, I mean, these cells have to be dismantled from the Turkish territory, because they are poisoning the relationship. And I will stop here. I would like to tell you, thank you very much for your patience. I tried to summarize this subject in a nutshell as much as I could. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and you can also write me an email. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Yes.
Thank you, Khay. Thank you very much. We've got a few hands up, so we'll go to questions in a moment, just after David does the little promo. Just before we do, Khay, while I'm thinking of it, I wanted to ask you, why is Turkey so keen on Hamas? I mean, if they would discard or terminate that relationship, it seems like a whole lot of new doors would open for them. But so what is it about Hamas that they seem to like?
The answer to this question, of course, it's something ideological. Mr. Erdogan, he did not become a Hamas supporter yesterday, but during his when he was a young guy, he was deeply impressed by the writings of the Muslim Brotherhood, especially when we are speaking about Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna. These people's works were translated into Turkish, and he's seeing Hamas and the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood as his ideological brothers. So when you want from him such an act, for him it's a betrayal to what he believes and to his allies. So it's not very easy. It's not very easy to take an action, even if it's for the immediate Turkish interests. It's not an easy decision for Mr. Erdogan. It's an ideological decision.
But the ideological position of Hamas is to destroy Israel. So does that mean that Turkey also subscribes to that policy?
No, of course. I think we cannot classify Turkey's position like white and black. As you can see here, while hosting Hamas, they are also inviting the Israeli president, and next to the brand new Israeli flags, they are posing the camps and they are smiling together. So we cannot, of course, call Turkey as an actor like Iran. This is the most important distinction point between Turkey and Iran. While Iran is a very solid ideological state, that it is basically, this is also dictating its foreign. We can say that Turkey is extremely flexible. It's a very elastic state. In Turkey, there is a public saying. I don't know if it's also applicable to English, but they are saying yesterday is yesterday, today is today. So they are very much flexible, and they can make their foreign policy compatible with the needs of this particular time frame.
Okay. We'll go to questions in a moment. David, if you just tell us what's coming up next week, and then we'll go to our questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Firstly, as we always do, we need support. The Australian Jewish Association does need your support. If you are not currently a member, please go to the website jewishassociation.org.au. You can join, you can make a donation, like and follow the Facebook page for the daily updates on news and views. Next week, we have a very special guest. We have Warren Mundine. We'll be talking about Indigenous issues, Israel, and various other principled policy issues with Warren Mundine, including some local ones, such as the potential for constitutional change for a voice and these sort of things. I want to add also that this Shabbat, I will be what's known as scholar in residence at Coogee Synagogue, speaking there 2 or 3 times. So anyone who's in the Coogee area, come along this Shabbat and we'll have some interesting discussions, I can guarantee you that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, we've got Dennis, Andy, Jason and Steve. So Dennis, I think you were first up, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much for this really interesting subject. My question is this: Erdogan is a dictator. He supports the Muslim Brotherhood. I understand the need for him to get closer to the Gulf states and that Iran is a threat. Does a leopard change his spots? Can he be trusted?
Of course not. Of course not. Maybe we can tell that trust and verify. Okay, like we cannot. In Hebrew, we have a saying "kabdeu vechashdeu," meaning that we have to be skeptical. We have to be skeptical at all costs, and I think in the very near future, if the Turkish economy will become prosperous again, we may see this U-turn in the Turkish foreign policy. I do not think that Mr. Erdogan's U-turn vis-a-vis Israel is a genuine one. I think he had no choice but to make necessary arrangements to make his foreign policy compatible with the demands of the Gulf. And that is why we are seeing this rapprochement between the two sides. That is why the Israeli government still did not nominate its ambassador to Ankara. And of course, this is the genuine reason.
Okay. Oh, I think we just lost the sound for a moment. Okay, thank you. Andy, I think you were next, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you a question about trade between Israel and Turkey. I live in Israel. I've been here 16 years. And I go to the pet store. The cat food is from Turkey. The clothes I buy is from Turkey. A lot of products come from Turkey. What exactly do you know that Turkey buys from Israel? And then before you answer that question, I wanted to ask you, did you know that at the ceremony for the Battle of Beersheba with the Anzacs, there's also ceremony with the Turks, and they play the Turkish national anthem, Israeli national anthem, and the Australian national anthem. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for this wonderful input. Let me add then another sentence. In the city of Beersheba, maybe you visited there, there is a statue of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, also the founder of modern Turkey, and there is a Turkish flag at this one of the city squares. So as we all know that the Ottoman army also fought in the land of Israel, so it's not a coincidence that we have also like graveyards, we have monuments in the land of Israel, yes. And regarding the question for the trade, I can sum up that, if I'm not mistaken, Israel is selling to Turkey chemicals and electronics and chips and these kind of high-tech materials, while it is buying from Turkey mostly plastics and fabrics and textiles. And the balance between the import and export is in favor of Turkey. Turkey is exporting more to Israel. So despite the fact that we have seen the deterioration between the relations, we can say that the Turks were not very much eager to deteriorate the relations further that could cut the relations dramatically. They always did their best to remain a flag at the embassy, even if the embassy was almost empty. So it means that as long as the Turks are going to profit, and as long as the Turks, as long as this balance, the trade volume, is in favor of Turkey, I assume that Turkey will never cut its ties with Israel. I would like to provide you another concrete evidence for that. Tel Aviv is considered as the most profitable station of Turkish Airlines after its stations at home, meaning that Tel Aviv, it's not because of the Israeli tourists are visiting Turkey, because of the Israeli tourists are using Istanbul as a hub to change their flights to transit, for the transit flights to other destinations, because Istanbul's place is crucial. It's very strategic. If you're flying to the Europe or to United States or to Africa or to Latin America, almost you have all destinations thanks to the Turkish Airlines. And maybe we can underline a very little disadvantage of Turkey in terms of location when we are speaking about the Far East. But again, for the transit flight, 2 hours from Tel Aviv to Istanbul is not a huge loss if you're gonna save like $1,000, for instance. So the aviation sector and also the tourism sector is extremely important incomes for the Turkish economy.
Sure. Okay, Jason, your turn. Please unmute.
So very quickly, my question is in two parts. You mentioned before that the Muslim Brotherhood ideology was influential on Erdogan. So my first question is very quickly, do you think that it's influential within the Turkish military? And to that degree, would Erdogan be concerned that a rapprochement with Israel would have him ending up like Anwar Sadat?
Okay. First of all, let me tell you that the Turkish army as an organization cannot be considered as an Islamist organization. But since the failed coup attempt of 2016, we are seeing that Erdogan is trying to recruit his own people to the ranks of the Turkish army. In every year, we are seeing that the Turkish army is becoming more and more pro-Erdogan. That's not a secret anymore. We happen to see a great purge within the ranks of the Turkish army. So, long story short, I do not think that we can see such a scenario that we happen to see in Egypt. When we are looking at the history of the relations between Israel and Turkey, we happen to see that the Turkish army was the core supporter of having proper relations with Israel. And if we have seen a deterioration in the relations, it's against the Turkish army's interests and desire. And as a result, we cannot tag this body as a problematic oppositional body when we are speaking about the relations with Israel.
Okay, Steve, please unmute.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for that, an excellent presentation. I gained the impression, very strong impression, that the improvement in relations between the Arab world in general and Israel is largely driven by a new generation of rulers in the Gulf monarchies and in Saudi Arabia. And in fact, you made the point that it's their money which is partly motivating Turkey's rapprochement with Israel. My question is about, my question is about.
Steve, you've muted yourself accidentally.
You muted yourself. We cannot hear
That's
you.
it.
Yes.
Now you're good.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, my question is about the Arab Street. I'm interested to understand, or in your impression of, how will this new generation of young Arab leaders, how will that disseminate? I mean, we are seeing, certainly in the Gulf monarchies, we're seeing a lot of business people being very, very friendly to Israel. We're seeing, I mean, you see more Israelis in the international airports in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi than you see Arabs. So how do you see this filtering down to the Arab street and having Arabs support Israel instead, and defeating the 100-year-old anti-Semitism that has been right throughout the Middle East for so long?
I think this will not be an easy move because it's very hard to eradicate all of these prejudices against the state of Israel. But we can say that these leaders in the Gulf are nowadays adopting a very brave stance. And since we are talking about the future, I can provide you a perspective, an optimistic perspective, that the impression that I get is also the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are making necessary amendments in the school textbooks of their education system, meaning that the new generations will not be raised with these negative contents as the previous ones did. So that's a huge plus in my opinion. And besides that, if we are trying to see the bigger picture, I think this change is not only limited with Israel. We are seeing recently that Saudi Arabia got another important decision of nominating two ladies to key governmental positions. In the recent years, they provided the women the right to acquire a driving license and to drive a car. For us, it's something very ordinary, but for the Saudi women, this is a revolutionary act. So if we are going to analyze all of these societal changes, these are tectonic changes. And I believe that these leaders will be remembered fondly in the future, and not only because they changed their stance vis-a-vis Israel, but also they are trying to make this rapprochement with the Western world, but a genuine normalization I'm talking about, a genuine rapprochement. And also I would like to underline another crucial point here, is that because of this new phenomenon that we are not going to rely on oil anymore in the future, and instead we are speaking about the electrical cars, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and other oil-rich nations in the Middle East, they came to the conclusion that they have to prepare the ground for the future now, otherwise they will be damaged in a very radical way in the future if they are not going to make this transition. And in this regard, they understand that Israel can provide an input to Saudi technology, to Emirati technology for irrigation. Let me say, Israel can contribute to tourism. For instance, if Emirates is trying to become the hub of the tourism in the Middle East, their most important interest is to obliterate and eradicate this prejudice about the Middle East, that the Middle East is a war zone. No, they would like to emphasize that Middle East is an exotic tourism spot. And if you would like to portray the Middle East as a tourism geography, then you should tackle the most important or the most highlighted, let me say, Middle Eastern conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And as a result, now we are seeing that the Emirates, and I really hope very soon the Saudi Arabia, they will hug the Israeli tourists. And as a result, they are going to prove to everyone that if you are trying to become a hub of tourism, then you should basically embrace everyone. So that's what they are doing, but they are doing it for their own future, for their own kids and grandchildren, because the face of tomorrow's economy will not be the same as today. So they are preparing the ground for this transition. And last word, they also happen to see that the Palestinians cannot contribute to Saudis or to Emiratis, but they are, you know, they're not contributing. But Israel, on the other hand, can contribute something very concrete, and that is the reason that we are seeing that that Palestinians are being considered as a burden. This is the word that I was looking for that I couldn't find. Yes, the Saudis and the Emiratis are considering the Palestinians as a burden, and they came to the conclusion that they would like to profit from their bilateral relations with Israel instead of this burden.
Okay, thank you, and long may it continue. Saul, we'll take you very quickly, please.
Very quickly indeed. Could you just comment on the ordinary Turk in the street, both rural and urban? How do they react to the seeming growth of Islamization and the decline of secularism?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this distinction between rural and urban, because this is very crucial. The urban Turks are more educated, and they are much more civilized, and they know many different foreign languages, and they are very global. So ideologically speaking, they are not against for this reconciliation with Israel. But when we are speaking about the rural Turks, unfortunately, we cannot say the same. We cannot see the same picture. The rural Turks are much more driven by religion, and they are not, unfortunately, they are not exposed to different media other than the state-biased TV channels of the Turkish administration, which has a very pro-Palestinian narration, of course. So we can be, I mean, when we are hearing the public opinion regarding the normalization with Israel, we can say that Erdogan is trying to persuade his people, his base, by saying that if we're gonna have better relations with Israel, then we will have better opportunity to aid Palestinians. And the most important example for that, during the last terror wave that we happened to experience here in Israel, it was in Ramadan of the Muslims. And during the holy month of Ramadan, unfortunately, because of Hamas's terrorist activities, both in the border with the Gaza Strip, but more, if we are speaking about especially in Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, Mr. Erdogan tried to intervene in these affairs. and he asked President Herzog to also take an action for not letting the Jews to go to the Temple Mount during the holy month of Ramadan. And later, according to the Turkish media, thanks to the request of Mr. Erdogan to Mr. Herzog, the Israeli police took a decision and barred the Jews from going to the Temple Mount. And then Erdogan went back to his people, to his base, and he said, you see, when I have this proper relationship with Israel, now I can protect the Dome of the Rock. Okay? So,
okay, very interesting.
Puts the things.
Okay, just before we go, I've just got one very quick question, Chai. Jewish life in Turkey. If can you give us in a minute what it's like and how they're going there?
Yes, I made Aliyah from Turkey until 2006. I was a member of Turkey's Jewish community. I lived in Istanbul. The Jews are mostly living in Istanbul, and we have almost 1,000 people, more or less, in the city of Izmir, in the western coasts of Turkey. At the capital Ankara, in capital Ankara, we have some families, like maybe 5 or 6 families, and that's all. We have functioning synagogues in Istanbul, and unfortunately, during the last decade, because of this friction between Israel and Turkey, many Jews decided to leave Turkey. And since we are the descendants of the Sephardim, who experienced the expulsion from Spain of 1492, most of the Jewish community is eligible to receive the Portuguese and the Spanish passports. And as a result, now we have a new phenomenon that apart from those who are coming to Israel for various reasons, including Zionism or reunion with their families, many youngsters nowadays are preferring to go to Holland, to Netherlands, because it is providing the cheapest tuition fee among all European Union universities. So now in Amsterdam and Rotterdam, we have tiny Turkish Jewish communities, if you did not know. This is a new phenomenon. And besides that, I can summarize it for you that nowadays we are seeing a relief in the Turkish Jewish community since there is this new reconciliation between Israel and Turkey. And today the situation is better, but unfortunately the economic situation is not good because of the devaluation of the Turkish lira. Once is considered as a very rich community, nowadays is suffering from the devaluation of the Turkish lira. And unfortunately, if you're also going to look at the newspaper of the Jewish community, you're going to see that we have, unfortunately, more funerals than Brit Milah or Brita. So we are having more, the death rates, I mean natural death rates, are higher than the birth rates. We have immigration to Israel and also to other countries. And as a result, unfortunately, the Jewish life in Turkey is not promising one. I assume in 50 years, we may not see a functioning Turkish Jewish community in Turkey.
Wow. Okay. All right. Look, on that note, we have come to time, a little bit over. Chai, I want to thank you so much. Your knowledge and expertise are so evident, and it's been a pleasure to listen to you. And we thank you very much. And you're with the Jerusalem Institute of Strategic Strategy and Security. People are welcome to have a look at the website. Chai, I did put your email address up on our chat, so sure. you may get a couple of emails from our audience. And I guess I guess there was a measured optimism in what you were saying. So Thank you so much, and we hope that this indeed eventuates. So thank you for your time.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you very much for having me. And maybe one day I'll see you here in Israel and maybe in Australia. God knows.
That would be a pleasure. Just before we go, I want to mention that the L'chaim program with Morris Klein is on right now. It's 3ZZZ. And Morris's guest tonight is Mark Zell, the lawyer for Avi Zinger, who is the Israeli Ben & Jerry's owner. So that's going to be very interesting. That's all we have for tonight. Please join us again next week with Warren and Mundine. We'll be talking about issues of interest to the Indigenous people. Don't forget, you can keep up to date with what AJA is doing and talking about on our Facebook page. Please like it and share it widely. But for now, we wish you all a very good evening. Thanks again to you, Chai, and thanks to everybody. And we look forward to seeing everyone else next week as usual. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.